Good morning, guys. It's Melinda here. Ready for chapter 4 of my video book series. Couple things before we start. Again, none of this is appropriate for children. So if there's a child in the room, please ask them to leave, or watch us with headphones on or earbuds. Not trying to tell you what to do. I just know my story, and I know that I wouldn't want my grandchildren hearing it till they're older. Not that I'm ashamed of it. I used to be for a long time. I'm not anymore, else I wouldn't be doing this. But my kids knew the story way too young, and I just want to keep it safe. But anyway, with that being said, this is chapter 4. It's going to be called Moving, Mania, and Men. And I just want to, there's a caveat on a couple things I want to talk to you guys about. One, I noticed when I go to edit this down that my coping mechanisms are showing. And I have several just from the abuse I suffered. Sometimes you'll see me do this with my hands. That's a coping mechanism. When I'm feeling certain feelings and stuff, I'll rub my hands. I used to like take my hands and wrap them up inside the bottom of my shirt and just hold them there. There are other times that I will laugh, and it'll seem odd, like, why is she laughing? If it's any extreme emotion, doesn't matter what the emotion is, I have a tendency, I will either laugh or cry. You'll hear a nervous laugh come out of me, or I'll start crying. And it's my brain's way of keeping it safe, because I have mental health issues. I have bipolar and OCD. I have ADHD. I have post-traumatic stress disorder. I have severe anxiety. A lot of those can be under the umbrella of bipolar. When I'm manic, I get hyper, and when I'm anxious, I'll get OCD-ish. I used to be severe. I still have a severe anxiety disorder, but my OCD has gotten a lot better as I've gotten older. And like the fear, the anxiety, you'll hear as I go. A lot of things that I went through, and I told you that I can see how it affected me later, but I can now draw, once I figure out how to draw a direct connection, it seems to help deliver me from those things. And I've had a lot of counseling to deal with what I've been through. So, and the Lord Jesus himself has healed me from a lot of it. So I'm able to talk about it openly for the most part without showing emotion. But I'm not going to lie to you. When I'm done making these videos, I'm exhausted. I make them first thing in the morning because it seems to be when my energy level can handle the subject matter. I decided to go with the video series too. I realized because when writing is so personal to me that it was draining me too much. I couldn't handle doing it. I can handle telling people it and have them maybe write it down, but I can't do it myself. It's just, it takes too much out of me. So, but with that being said, I want to talk to you about the title, Soapbox or Stones, A Search for Home. Excuse me. Now, I already talked to you about A Search for Home because I'm basically going to talk about what happened in each house and significant happenings in each house. And there's something cool that comes later, but I'll wait on that, which has to do with that. Sometimes the memories, because I've moved so many times, will get blurry, and I can't tell, like, if this happened, you know, at this house, or did it happen here? For the most part, I have a pretty clear memory of it, but every once in a while, it'll get blurry. And I'll think, okay, did that happen first and then this happened? So I just want to put that out there that sometimes it might be a spot that's blurry and I can't tell which came first, chicken or the egg. But for the most part, I'm pretty accurate on what the timeline, because if you know me, I'm a neurotic about dates and I really like linear. It's really important to me. Just like I said, I like boundaries. You can have freedom, but I want that boundary there because that boundary means safety for me. So as long as I have the freedom to be, you know, me, but I need that. And same thing with linear. even though when I talk, I'm doing this. I'm starting at the beginning, but I bounce forward and back. As long as it's a timeline that I can bounce on, I'm good. So I'm going to try and give that to you as best I can. But, excuse me, before we start, I'm going to do a quick prayer because I need to invite the Lord, which I have already. But I want you to know that for the listeners too, I want to invite the Lord that you would hear what God wants you to hear. So, dear Heavenly Father, I just lift up this chapter, and I just pray that you would tell me what to say. Help me not to forget important things because, Lord, you know at the end there's a goal to all of this story. That it may have been a mess, but you made it a message, and it may have been a test, but you made it a testimony. So, Lord, I commit this to you. I pray for the listeners. I pray that they would hear what you want them to hear, that they would have takeaways to apply in their own lives and know that there's hope and that the story isn't finished yet, that you're still writing it. We praise you and thank you for that. I know that you've been with me every step of the way, and I trust you, Lord, to do this. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, chapter 4, moving, Mania, and men. When we last left off, we had been threatened in the house in Detroit that they were going to burn it down. And my mom packed us up and left our dog in the back step, and we split. Well, as we left, we found out, I'm not sure how, through the news or something, they did burn the house. They kept their word, and it was burned. Obviously, the house still stood because it's a brick house, but the inside was burned. With that, my mom left. There's a lot of traveling that goes on here, just so you know. Remember I told you my mom bounces between Detroit and Loves Park? This is one of the episodes where we go back and forth. So it might be a little hard to keep track of, but I'll do my best. We moved from Detroit, and sometimes too, side note, sorry, sometimes it's hard to tell which siblings were with us because oftentimes the younger siblings would move out and move in with the older siblings because they just couldn't cope with what was going on in the house. So that would happen from time to time, or they would move with aunts or whatever, like there was a time when my brother lived with my aunt, and there's some of that going on, just so you know. Well, we moved to Loves Park, and we moved to my grandma's house. And I absolutely recall my sister Pauline was with us, who again, was 6 years older than me. And at this point, I was 7. She was 13. And then my little brother and sister. I can't recall if my brother Paul was with us. I think he was. But Norm and Joanne and Judy now were kind of on their own. And so we moved to my grandma's house. Now, I was trying to recall, and I'm not sure if it was here. At some point we do, and that'll come later. But I can't recall if we spent a short time in a trailer at the end of her driveway before we moved in the house or not. So I'm not sure. Can't remember. But I know that ultimately we ended up in her house in her basement. And it was kind of cool, I thought. Because we had like a living room, and it was just an open space, and we made it a living room and a bedroom and stuff, and we stayed there for a little while. And believe it or not, my sister Pauline got a job at a restaurant, a local pizzeria at 13. Why? I don't know. Maybe she lied about her age. I don't know, but she got the job. She was a waitress. And I remember for Christmas, because I was in second grade at this point when we moved there. I was in second grade, and I remember for Christmas she got my sister and myself and my 2 cousins got us all matching outfits for Christmas, and we got matching socks, I think, and it was a really cute, she was 13, and she bought us all outfits, and I thought, which was very sweet. But eventually we didn't stay at my grandma's. We moved into this apartment, and it was one of the few times that I remember my mom getting a job. There was a place up the street we lived on, the street's name was Venus, and up the street it's called a Dog and Suds, which was like an A&W where, a car hop kind of thing. And she worked there. I remember her working there. And we lived in the downstairs basement apartment. And I remember one time that there was a storm, and it was a horrendous storm. Like, I just remember the curtain lighting up red through the lightning, lighting this darker colored curtain up, and it was just red. And I remember being petrified because several times it had happened when we lived on Hull. It had happened, it had happened here, and then it would happen later when we were visiting. My sister would take us to East Tawas, and we would get to visit her boyfriend's family, and that was actually, those were fun memories, and hang out with the kids. But one time when we were, I don't know if it was there, or if I don't know if it was in Pontiac, but at some point somewhere through this, there was a tornado warning, and we had to sit in a tub because they didn't have a basement. And between that, whatever traumatic thing with a storm that happened in Detroit, and this particular thing that happened when I was in second grade, made me petrified of storms. From that point, I just remember being so scared. And when I was looking out the window, it's happened more than once, where you see a transformer blow. I've seen that happen more than once. We've actually been in a vehicle with my husband and had one struck by lightning to the point where your eyes turn white. But I'll get to that later. And then it takes a few seconds for you to be able to see. Yeah. So I have my reasons for being afraid of storms. However, I will tell you, my children, when they were growing up, wanted to be storm chasers. Like, they loved it. As much as I hated it, they loved it. And eventually God would deliver me from my fear of storms by forcing me to be caught in a storm for 45 minutes, and I had nowhere to escape. And my goal was to protect other people, and he just delivered me. I stopped being afraid after that. I faced my fear to the point of not being afraid. But back to the story. Like I said, I told you I'll bounce. Back to this. I remember just it scarring me. And it was feeding more of that fear that drove me since I was a little girl in that closet. Well, that's like a vivid memory I have. And one other vivid memory I have, which is my people-pleasing thing. And I have a friend, and I love her very much, my friend Bren. She's been my friend for a long time. And she's always very affirming, very encouraging, very kind. She is one of my biggest cheerleaders ever in my entire life, ever. She cheerleads me. I love her so much. She's actually a really dear friend. And she's fiercely protective of me too. And she'll fight for me when I don't fight for myself. And she was actually one of the people God used as an instrument to help me deal with all of my past. I adore her. But she always told me, she said, because I'm like, I'm not good at sports. And she said, yeah, I think you are. I think you're a natural athlete. You just never were cultivated to be an athlete. Now I'm overweight because I've gained I had a heart condition, and medicine caused me to gain weight, whatever. Thyroid issues, I'm older now. But when I was younger, I was actually pretty fit for the most part. And she said you were never cultivated. And what's funny is, looking back, I think the story I'm about to share with you is one of the reasons why. Even though I would play baseball with friends later, it was never the same after this. I was in school and we were playing baseball. And I don't know if you know baseball, when you swing, the key is to not throw the bat. Once you hit the ball, don't throw the bat, don't throw the bat. Well, I was 7 years old and didn't do that. I hit the ball and I threw the bat. It was like a swing, and then you let go of the bat, throw and run. But when I let go of the bat, I hit a little girl. And when I hit this little girl, oh my gosh, I remember the teacher screaming at me. He made me go to the end of the line, and he was just yelling at me about throwing the bat. And then all the other kids started teasing me and yelling at me for throwing the bat, for hitting this girl. And I remember feeling devastated and thought, I don't ever want to play sports again. I don't ever want to feel this feeling again. Because remember I told you that fight or flight, I will avoid There are times where I will avoid pain at all costs, but then there are other times I'll walk right through fire if I believe it's the right thing to do. So like I said, that fight or flight drove me, and this was a particular thing. I thought, I don't ever want to do this again. I don't want to feel this again. Now, mind you, as I had kids and stuff, I encouraged them in sports, and they were actually very athletic. And maybe I lived vicariously through them. I don't know. I never forced them. They loved it, but I tried one other time on church on church softball when I got older, and our pastor actually asked us to quit because we were so bad. Oh my gosh. Thinking about it makes me, oh my gosh, it's so funny. Because he was fine, we were friends. But this is why, because it was this bad later, okay? I hit the ball magically, I don't know. Miraculously, I should say. I don't believe in magic. But anyway, I hit the ball miraculously, made it to first base. The next guy up, his name was Kevin. It was a friend of mine's husband. He hit the ball. I make it to second. By the time I make it to second, he's already past first. I go to third. He's behind me, waiting. Waiting for me. When I get across the plate, he's like one step behind me. It was so funny. After that, he's like, yeah, and at that point I was 30 something, so it was too late for me, but I never played again after that, except for like catch with my kids and stuff like that. But I don't know. I thought it was pretty funny. Anyway, back to this. Those seem to be the three main things. That storm, my sister's kindness to us at Christmas, and that event there. That was the move there. Now, I said moving, Mania, and men. At some point, I'm not sure how this happened, but at some point, we're drawn back to Detroit after this. My mom moves back to Detroit. I don't know if there was a guy. I feel like remember I said sometimes I can't tell if it happened before or not. But this is when somehow or another my mom met a guy, because there was a lot of men in and out of our lives, but she was going to marry him. And when she went back to Detroit to marry him, she went in the house and he went to the basement and he was dead. So what we had planned didn't happen. So where we ended up going was, she had a friend named Grady, and he had a house on Gray. And so we got to move into this house on Gray. Now, I don't know if it was the death of this man. I don't know if it happened at this time or not. But at this point now, I remember my brother Paul was living with us. He was back living with us now that we moved back from Loves Park back to Detroit. And our mattress, we had a mattress on the floor, I think on the floor in the living room and stuff. And my mom's drinking got really bad at this point. And I don't know if it was from the guy dying. I'm not really sure. I can't say. I just know it got really bad. And she got more and more violent. One time, and this was like, I know 8 Mile and Hull sounds ghetto. This was like more ghetto than 8 Mile and Hull. This wasn't quite Jefferson Avenue, but it was awfully close. It was awfully close. And so it was not the greatest house, not the greatest neighborhood. We were literally, when I went to school, because now by this time had passed. I think she stayed in Loves Park enough for us to finish 2nd grade. And then we moved back to Detroit for 3rd grade. So I was in 3rd grade at this point, and it was an all African-American school. There was one Hispanic, and I was the only white person there. And let me tell you, it was super bad. We would have our lunches at our desks, and they were like saran wrap in the green, be a green styrofoam tray and a sandwich, an apple, and something else, and it would be saran wrap. People would take my lunches. There was nothing I could do. People knocked over my desk. Nothing I could do. I'd be afraid to go to the bathroom. So I would hold it all day, which would make me sick. When I got home, it would end up causing me to throw up, and because I would get such bad stomach aches. And my stomach seems to be where I carry my angst too. But it was pretty bad. Yeah, it was pretty bad. Let me just say that. The Hispanic guy was from the neighborhood, so, which is funny because later I would end up meeting him again later. But he was from the neighborhood, so everybody was fine with him, but I was new to the neighborhood and I was white. It was not a good combination. So anyway, with that being said, my mom was, like I said, drinking, and she came home one night, and I remember this vividly. I remember sleeping on the floor, mattress on the floor in the living room, and she came in, and she was drunk, and she just started wailing on me, and I mean wailing, like just beating the crap out of me, and I was startled and woke up, and I was screaming like, Mom, stop, please stop. And the voice that was coming out of her was not her voice. It was a demonic voice, and I could hear it. It was demonic. And the way that she was talking to me, and she was just beating me and calling me names. And I don't know at what point, I don't know, because I have a tendency to yell, "It's me, Melinda," when this happens. And I don't know if that's what snapped her out of it and made her stop, or if my brother Paul came in and stopped her. I'm not sure. I don't remember. But I just remember that vividly. And she would have ended up doing that more than once in my life. Every few years she would do that to me, and it was weird. But that was the first time that I recognized that something was like, seriously, something more than just like she was broken, to a point that there was something spiritual was going on too. Like I recognized like something weird's happening, because it wasn't her voice. We actually ended up not staying there long. We ended up moving again, and we may have even moved, this is where it gets a little blurry. We may have even moved back to Illinois and then back again to Detroit. I can't tell, or it may have just been a long visit. I don't know. It sort of gets blurry here. But I do know, I remember the day that I knew we were leaving because I was in school and my brother Paul came to get me. And that was it. We were gone. We left. And this is where it gets a little sketchy and a little blurry. I can't honestly tell you if we moved back to Loves Park or not, or if we just moved straight to Madison Heights. So there's a little bit of a gap, and I don't have very many of them, but this is one of the areas where it's blurry. And this may have been where we lived at the end of the trailer at my grandma's. I don't know, because my mom, like I said, we moved so many times that it was unreal. And the 45 times are only the times that I can remember. Those are the times I specifically know we moved. So anyway, we left there and we end up moving to Madison Heights. Now, Madison Heights is actually, at least back then, was a decent neighborhood. It really was. There were nice little houses in a row. Actually rather like living there. And at this point, I'm 8 going on 9. I turned 9 in the house in Madison Heights, and it was a bi-level, and I remember loving the bi-level because you could go up or go down, and I just loved this house. I felt safer there, safer than I had in the previous house, but a lot of stuff went down in this house. A lot of really bad, not good stuff. I'm going to start to get into some areas that are probably going to be uncomfortable for some people. So if you need a partner to watch this with, somebody to go to watch this with if you're an adult, or if you want to watch it with a friend, feel free, because it's going to get uncomfortable. Not that it hasn't been, but it's going to get pretty not good. But I want to interject, there's hope. Please hear me when I say that. That thread of hope, Soapbox or Stones, A Search for Home, it ends well, okay? But this house, a lot of stuff going on here. Okay, in this particular house, I remember a friend down the street, and she had, I'll start off with the good part. She had these Barbie dolls, okay? And I remember loving these Barbie dolls. Actually, not Barbie, baby dolls. And they would, some would wet, and some would open their eyes. And I just remember going to her house and being like, oh, this is so great, because in my heart, all I wanted to do was be a mommy, and I wanted to have a home, and I wanted to be a good mommy, and I loved it. I felt safe at her house, and we had fun, and we were playing the swing, and then we had friends at the other end, and I remember there was this one friend of my sister's, he loved Alice Cooper. I don't know, whatever. But I felt like we had a community, like there were actually people that we were friends, like kids. There was someone, she had was a special needs girl, and she lived like on the next block, and she would come over, and we were friends. And I think I had a friend, her name was Sue, and she would invite me over, and we would have hot dogs, and she would, I remember she would put like the paper plate over the water after it had boiled, and set the buns on there so it would like soften the buns and make them soft. And I just remember that, and it was awesome, because outside of the house, I think that's where the safety came, is I felt safe with the people around us. And during this time too, during that blurry time too, there were times, like I said, my sister Joanne was dating this guy named Johnny. It was the same guy with the GTX. Like I said, he dated more than one of my siblings, but I also know, I found out later that he raped one of my siblings too. Didn't find that out till later, till I was an adult. But at the time, I did not know that, and he was always nice to me, so I don't know anything about that. I just know that that happened to one of my siblings. But they used to take us to a place called East Tawas, and he had family there and stuff. And I remember going, and he had siblings, and he had relatives, and there was a girl my age, and we used to play with the string. Remember the string? We would make Jacob's Ladder or cup and tea saucer, and we would play that game where you hold it and they stick your hands in it. And so I just remember going there, and there was a lot of good times. And there was one time when we were in East Tawas, I don't know what we were doing. It was the middle of winter, and we were walking through the snow, but we were like on mountains and stuff. And sometimes it was like the trail was like this big, and we're walking and you could fall off. And I just remember being really scared again. I love the snow part, but I remember being scared. But by the time we got back to the car and stuff, like we were frozen. We had like snow frozen up to our knees. Like we were just frozen. But it was fun in a weird sort of way, but also scary. And I remember at this house, they had this big, beautiful boxer, and it was a lovely dog, just sweet. But at some point somewhere, and I'm not sure where, but in the blurriness before I turned 9, that being an 8-year-old blur, we had visited someone, and they had a dog, a big dog. And I remember walking outside, and they had said you couldn't get, it was chained up, like don't get near the dog. Well, I had made the mistake of walking outside or something. They were outside playing or something, and the dog was there, and he ran and jumped up on my back, and he went like this to bite my neck, and I instinctively put my neck down and just started running. Well, guess what? That scarred me for dogs for a long time. If I see a dog loose or stuff, I'm like, "Ugh," like I instantly go into a protective mode. But that scarred me pretty bad. I was afraid of dogs for a while after that. But anyway, it was also at this house, I remember turning 9, and again, my mom did nothing for my birthday, and my oldest sister, Judy. Side note, I think I'm going to stop really quick, and I don't know if this will help you at all, but my oldest sister's name was Judy. Then I think there was Joanne and Norm. That might be switched. It might be Judy, Norm, Joanne, but I think it was Judy, Joanne, Norm. Paul, Pauline, me, Melinda, Lorraine, and then my little brother Clyde. So that's the 8 of us. The only ones I get mixed up, and if I do quick calculation, 40, 23, she'd be 63. So my brother Norm is older. So it is Judy, Norm, Joanne, Paul, Pauline, me, Lorraine, and Clyde. Okay, with that being said, my oldest sister Judy at this point was living with her boyfriend Kenny. He seemed like a nice enough guy, and I remember because we ended up getting another little, we still had Frisky. That dog followed us a long time. But we ended up getting this another little dog because she had been dating Kenny for a while, even from back when we lived on Hull, because that big furry dog that we left, his name was Kenny, which was named after him. And this one we called Judy. It looked a lot like that dog we had left, except it was much smaller. And my sister Judy also had this Chihuahua named Chanel, not Chihuahua, a poodle, white poodle named Chanel that she treated like a queen. But Judy had come over, it was my 9th birthday, and she had brought me presents for my birthday. Because again, my mom didn't do anything, and I remember feeling really special because of what she did. And from time to time, you would see that with my family. Because just like right around this time at some point, because I think we went to visit like Thanksgivings. I will tell you this about, it's the one good memory I consistently have. At Thanksgiving, we would always go to my grandma's house. All of my aunts, because my mom had 8 kids, but she was also from a family of 8. We would all get together, with the exception of my uncle, who I hated. But anyway, and my grandfather, who I hated, but he was divorced from my grandma at this point, so it didn't matter. She was married to her second husband, Curtis, but they would make this spread, and they would all have the kids, like, we would peel potatoes, or we would snap peas, or we would shuck corn, and they would make this big elaborate meal, and we would all the cousins got to hang out together, and it was just so much fun, and I look forward to it every Thanksgiving. Except for when they told us to go clean up the kitchen. I didn't like that part, because a lot of training came from right around here is when my mom started having us do the cleaning. Like, I learned to do the dishes. I learned to do laundry. Learned to do a lot of things at a really young age. But that's the one good memory I have. That was a consistent memory that we had going to my grandma's at Thanksgiving. Christmas was, you know, a shot in the dark. Usually one of my siblings would try to do something kind and make it great. Sometimes my mom would, but it just depended on where she was at in her alcoholic journey. But again, at this house, my sister made it great, you know, for my birthday and stuff. And I remember during this time, there was this guy, he would come and he would come visit my mom. He was a plumber. I don't know, plumber. But I remember there was speculation that my little brother might be his. But as I talked to my brother later, he said, no, I think he was my dad's. So it's hard to tell, because like I said, there were men that came in and out of our lives, my mother's lives. Some were nice, some were horribly mean. I remember this one guy who they think is Lorraine's father, maybe. He was a mean son of a bitch, but excuse my French, sorry, but he was. But we'll talk about him later. Okay, so back to being 9 at this house in Madison Heights. Like I said, I actually start to have fun memories. I'm going to tell you this, my brother, Norm. He's, I love him so much. But like I said, he was with Glow still, his girlfriend. And for Christmas as a joke. Okay, why? I don't know. He came and he gave my mom this box. Well, my mom opens the box and it's a live chicken. Because Beretta was big at the time. but it was a live chicken. And we named him Fred, like the bird and Beretta. And guess what? We kept that chicken. He ended up moving with us for a while. We kept him. Like, you would wake up and he was like a pet chicken. We would wake up in the morning and he might be pecking us on the nose or pecking us on the chest, and he would lay eggs. And I'm not sure how we could be in the city limits and have this chicken, but we kept him. As a matter of fact, he would move with us to 2 different places. This chicken moved with us. And so, but we had this pet chicken named Fred from Norman Glow, which is funny. I don't know. I don't think my mom was too happy, but us kids loved it. But my sister Joanne, my sister Judy was moved out with Kenny. My sister Joanne had moved in with us at some point. And she was dating Johnny. Like I said, she was dating Johnny, and they took us on trips to East Tawas and different things like that. But my sister Joanne was bipolar too. She just didn't know she was bipolar, and she struggled heavily with drugs. And Johnny did a lot of drugs too. Like I said, there was a lot of drugs going in our house. And some of it, like, my oldest sister loved to smoke pot. She was a pot smoker probably till the day she died. Just smoking pot. She loved it. I know that because she would get skinny and then get heavy and then get skinny and heavy. So I know there was like cocaine. I know they did Quaaludes and acid and you name it, they did it. But my sister Joanne, my sister Judy was afraid of needles, so she never shut up, but my sister Joanne did. She was, like, when I say an addict, I mean like an addict. It just progressively got worse. But again, I think that there was a lot of stuff going on with Joanne that nobody knew, because she reminds me a lot of me, in the fact that she could be really super tough, fiercely protective, but sometimes she could be so fragile, like glass, that you thought she would break. And she was wrestling. There was some stuff going on, and there was a guy, or I'll get to that after, but there was one day, I think her and Johnny, I don't know if they got in a fight or what, but I walk upstairs and I go to the bathroom and I open the door and she's standing there with a razor blade and she's cutting her wrist. She's just, and I can see her digging at it. There's blood all over the sink, and I just sort of big-eyed, and she said, "Shh, don't say anything." So I back out the door, I shut it, and I haul ass down those stairs screaming, "Mom, Mom, Mom, Joanne's trying to kill herself." Well, as Joanne heard me screaming, she runs out of the bathroom, runs down the stairs, and runs out the front door. And then Johnny, her boyfriend, and my mom start chasing her, literally chasing her down the street to stop her. And she, they end up putting her in a mental institution for a short time, trying to help her get better. But the truth is that they didn't know back then what they know now about mental health issues. And she didn't get the help that she needed. She ended up coming back home. And I don't know if her and Johnny split up after that, but at some point they did, because there was this guy across the street, and his nickname was Fonzie. And she started dating Fonzie. Well, Fonzie beat her. He hit her. And she took it. She tolerated it. And even looking back now, I'm so surprised that she would tolerate it. But I think that she was like the rest of us, just searching for somebody to love us. Because her biological dad, her and Norm's biological dad, had nothing to do with them. Nothing. My dad, when he was alive, had stepped in and I think tried to father them and be a father. And there are some weird memories that I have that I'm not sure what they are. But I don't want to talk about those because I'm not sure what they are. Just weird little things that I'm like, I don't know what that was. But anyway, she took it from him. And I remember thinking, why is she doing that? But I think she was like the rest of my siblings, just wanting love. But around this time, and this is when it's going to start getting weird and uncomfortable, but I have to share it because it's part of my journey. At some point during this time, and I don't know why, and this would happen our entire lives, but my uncle showed up, my Uncle Junior, and he would follow us around, and it literally makes me sick to my stomach. And this might be why, because I feel like, I know that it started like somewhere after my dad died. This became a thing. And I think this is why my mind is blurred. And I will tell you why. Johnny's sister, Renee, ended up marrying my Uncle Junior at some point. So I know that he was in and out of our lives. They end up divorcing, of course, but he was in and out of our lives in some bizarre ways. And I don't know if I just simply block him out and I don't want to deal with it. But this I remember. He was living with us, but he was having a sexual relationship with my sister, Pauline. And I wouldn't normally say her name, but we've discussed this. Because at the same time, like, Pauline hated it and wanted out, but my mom didn't seem to stop it. And like, he lived with us. And like, Pauline finally, she was the one who had the courage to turn in what was happening in our house. She turned my mom in. And she went to school and tried to get help, and DCFS came. Well, let me tell you something about DCFS and about kids who are abused. When they came to investigate us, I remember standing next to my sister Joanne, and they said, is anything going on? And they were questioning us. And we said, no, no, no. And we all made Pauline look like a liar. And she wasn't lying. But you know why we said no? Because we didn't want to be taken away from the only thing that we knew, even if it was bad. So let me tell you, kids lie. Kids lie and will say nothing's going on. And kids sometimes lie and say stuff's going on, and it isn't. But stuff was going on here, and Pauline wasn't lying. She wasn't lying. And she stood up. She stood up. And I feel bad looking back because my mom, like, turned on her like venom. And the truth is she was telling the truth. And she ended up moving in because at one point my uncle, like, very dramatically, oh, Jesus, forgive me for that thought, very dramatically pulls out this shotgun and is going to kill himself. I'm not going to tell you what I feel in that moment, because in that moment, I wouldn't have been sad if he did. In that moment. Now I feel ashamed for feeling that way now, but back then, wouldn't have cared. I hated him. Hated him, passionately hated him. And it took a long time, and wait till you hear how it ends for me, but it took a long time not to hate him. Long time, decades. And my siblings still, some of my siblings still struggle because he was messed up. So anyway, some other things that are weird about living in this house, not weird, but kind of scary and unusual. This is going to sound weird too, but when we were in Detroit, like on Hull, there was something about, I don't know if it was because it was a ghetto, but we did weird stuff, like we would put mattresses outside and we would jump off the roof onto the mattresses. I remember people doing it in apartment complexes, and sometimes like vacant houses got burnt down, and just, but there was something about putting, and the thought of it now is like, why did we do that? We were endangering ourselves. We were little kids jumping off the roof onto these mattresses, but people did it. And people started empty houses on fire. I don't know, just weird. Anyway, something that we used to do is we would take the mattress when it was inside. If there was like a box spring in a mattress, we would take the mattress and we would fold it back, and then we would let it go and it would like spring back. And sometimes you would fold it back and then sort of let the weight of the mattress springing back sort of fling you forward. So it was a game that us kids used to play. Well, this particular day, because remember I told you sometimes our beds were on the floor, sometimes they were on frames. It just depended on where we were at in that moment. And this particular place, we had beds on frames. And like I said, I actually thought this was a decent house from what I recall. But my sister, Lorraine, had folded the bed back playing. But what she didn't know is sometimes when you folded the bed back, you would pull it back and you couldn't see what was in front of you. Well, when she pulled the bed back, my nephew, Stephen, Joanne's son, had crawled up onto the bed and was looking out. There was this sliding glass window, big one, and he was looking out of it, and there was no screen. And I come up the stairs, and I see what's about to happen, so I go to yell Lorraine to tell her not to do it, but before I could, she lets go of the mattress. It flies forward. Stephen goes flying out the window. And I run to the window and I bend down and I see him laying. There was these cement steps that went to the back door, which was the kitchen. Because it was a bi-level, the steps went down. And I see him laying at the bottom of those steps. So I start screaming, run down the stairs. My mom runs out the kitchen. When she opens the door, the screen door hits his back. And when it hits his back, he takes a breath. And when he took a breath, it made him start breathing. They took him to the hospital, and he had to wear a bag because they had to make sure that how they tested babies is if he peed blood. So they had to watch him for a while. But he ended up being okay, and the doctor said, and this is going to sound silly, but he said babies bounce because their bones aren't formed yet. So he was blessed to be that young. So yeah. And that was scary. I remember that being frightening to me. And again, it's just stirring this anxiety, this constant underlying anxiety in me. And I think my sister Pauline at this point had moved in with Judy, or was staying with Judy or something, because I recall about this time, and this is terrible. I remember she was traumatized by it. They had a gas stove and it wouldn't light, and she lit a match in it and burned her eyebrows off. So I remember that with my sister Pauline, which is pretty scary at that time. And I also remember around this time, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere around this time, someone stole my sister's dog, stole Chanel, and it devastated my sister because she loved that dog a lot. Well, also during this time, my mom started dating a man named Lee, and he owned his own business, Royal Oak Construction, and Royal Oak was near Madison Heights. It was a nicer neighborhood because there was Madison Heights, Hazel Park, Royal Oak, and Royal Oak was nicer than Madison Heights, and I think Hazel Park was, it was Madison Heights, Hazel Park, Royal Oak, kind of like that. Like if you go into Chicago, there are certain neighborhoods that are nicer. But anyway, he owned his own construction company in Royal Oak, and he was actually a nice guy. Lee was a nice guy. He was stable and he was nice. And what's funny, she was also dating another guy. And I don't know if they were partners, or he owned a roofing company. So I don't know if they knew each other or whatever through this. I don't know. I'm not sure how it went, but she started dating these two guys. Well, we ended up moving from Madison Heights to West Otis with not Lee, but the other guy. And for some reason, I knew his name, but it's slipping my mind right now. I want to say John for some reason, but we moved to West Otis, and I remember I liked the house. It was a nice house. We had bunk beds, and this guy too was a nice guy. He had 2 daughters, and they moved in with us, and a lot of kids in the house, but he made it stable. I just remember we got an allowance for the first time. We did chores. I remember standing there doing dishes with Johnny's daughter, and we learned to do laundry, and we got to go to the circus. And just, I remember, like, we would get to go to, it was called Burger Chef. We would get to go to Burger Chef and eat, and like there were different things. Oh, this just reminded me of something. I forgot to tell you something too, which is funny. This is a side note going all the way back to Hull. There's a place called Cobo Hall, and that's where we would go see Santa Claus. And when I was a kid, like, I'd be excited to go see Santa Claus. Well, one time my sisters took us to see Santa Claus. I think it was Judy took us to see Santa Claus. And you had to, like, go through this thing, and you saw him, and then you came down and then came out. So you came out a different spot than you came in. Well, when I came out, I couldn't find Judy. And they ended up like doing the announcement and stuff. And I remember, again, anxiety coming, and I stood by the front, and I got to, like, hand out whatever it was they were handing out, candy canes or programs or whatever. And then my sister came and found me. And I just remember that fear being set in of losing things. Like, it was that sense of loss and being lost. And again, remember I said A Search for Home, that sense of lost just was being fed deeper and deeper and deeper in us. Well, when we lived on Madison Heights, at some point, I remember this distinctly, and I don't know who she was, but somebody started taking us to Awanas. So this was the first time that I was introduced to, like, God and Jesus. And I remember going to Awanas, and it was just a young girl, and she was very sweet. It was around that 8-year-old, 8 or 9-year-old. And I remember that too, in that house in Madison Heights. And so that was my sort of first introduction to understanding that there was somebody bigger than us, even though I was always feeling lost, that there was somebody who cared, but I still feared them like I feared everything else. That was developing in me. So we moved to West Otis, which was a street name in Hazel Park. And it sort of became normal, and it was kind of cool, like, for a little while. And I remember, like, I just remember feeling like, wow, this is what it's like to have a home and a family. But unfortunately, it didn't last. Again, I'm guessing, I don't know for sure what happened, but I'm guessing either my mom cheated on him, or it was alcohol, because he and his daughters left, and Lee moved in. And Lee was a nice guy too. Lee was a nice guy. He really was. I actually liked Lee, even though there were some things that were said later. He never did anything to hurt me. He was always kind to me. He was always telling me, one of these days you're going to listen to me, Melinda. And, but here was the first time that I can honestly say that I experienced the opposite of what the world thinks. They always think that the man abuses the woman. My mom abused he wasn't my stepdad at the time, abused Lee, horribly abused him. It was horrible. And I don't know if Lee was actually there in this memory, or if there was, like, John was there. I think that was his name. And then he and his kids leave, and then there's a gap where there's nobody, and then Lee moves in. I'm not sure. That, again, is a blurry spot. And I know some issues went on with my siblings at this time. One of my sisters had some serious things that happened, but that's her story. And the only reason when I share about my siblings, the only reason I share those is because I know how that it affected me. So like I said, some of the stories are going to bleed over. Some of the stories, something happened, but it's just them. It didn't bleed over into my story. Like my uncle bled over into me. So I'm going to talk about that openly, and she talks about it openly, and our family talks about it openly. And I want her free from the shame of what that man did to her and did to me and did to a lot of my siblings and did to a lot of my relatives. I want her free like I'm free, because she was a child and he abused her and took advantage of her and manipulated her and hurt her. And so, and she wasn't the only one in my family he did that to. But my mom had trained us all to accept that this was normal, that this was how it is. Because remember I told you that some people, when they're abused, they'll become abusers themselves, advocates against, or they'll just be an enabler. My mom was an enabler. However, I do think that my mom at times too was an abuser. I don't recall her ever doing it to me, but I believe that some of my siblings she may have abused, 100%. So it's hard. I love my mom. It took a lot to get to a place of freedom with her, because she was broken and in pain too. And I'm not excusing her behavior. I will never excuse behavior of hurting a child. Won't do it. You'll never hear those words out of my mouth. I just understand it. I understand why she did what she did, because she was broken, because someone did it to her. I understand the generational sin of it. I don't understand the sin, because unacceptable, period, unacceptable. I don't give a crap what the world tells you. Absolutely no adult should be bringing any harm to a child in any way. They don't have the ability for consent. They don't have the ability to understand what's happening. Your job is to protect them, period. You are to provide for them and protect them. Keep them safe, empower, encourage, and equip them. That is all every single adult on this earth, whether you have a kid or not, that is your job. And I'm sorry, see, this is a soapbox. See what happens? I told you, a lot of my experiences will get me on a soapbox. And when it comes to kids, I know what we suffered. And there was nobody there. And when Pauline tried to help us, we were so broken that we were protecting the violators. But we didn't know it at the time, because it was what we knew, and we were more scared of the unknown than we were about what we were already familiar with, even if what we were familiar with was hurting us. Yeah. Anyway, I gotta move on or I won't be able to. Somewhere, I don't know if Lee was there. I don't think he was at the time, so I'm guessing when, I think his name was John. I don't know why that's coming to my mind, but when he moved out, between him moving out and Lee moving in, there was, I remember, again, boys coming over to visit. There was a guy named Keith. He came, and I don't know. I just remember different guys coming, but I also remember falling out of the bed. It was either me or my sister Lorraine. We had bunk beds, and one of us fell out of the bed and like jacked up her eye. I think it was Lorraine. But one of these times in the middle of the night, I woke up, and again, my mom was drinking, of course, and I remember waking up, and it was dark, but I could hear, I don't know if I went to the bathroom or what, but I could hear something, and I went into the living room, and there was my mom laying on her back, and she had a knife. She had a knife in her hand, and she was holding it over her stomach, and I could see her completely intoxicated, rocking back and forth, and she was contemplating committing suicide, killing herself, and I could see it. And at 9 years old, you feel hopeless to do anything. And I remember that. I just remember her mumbling, and I'm not sure what I did at that point. I don't know if I tried to take it from her. I think I probably didn't because I was afraid she would turn it on me. And I know that sounds extreme, but you will find out later that she did she did throw knives, and knives were kind of a thing for her. And you'll find out as we go along. I don't know if I just went back to bed. I'm not sure if I said a prayer. I don't know. I just knew the sensation of her being in pain and things being out of control, and there was nothing I could do. Maybe I felt like a victim in that moment. I don't know. I can't say what my 9-year-old mind was feeling. I just know it happened. I know that she didn't commit suicide that night. But when Lee moved in, as nice as Lee was, and he was such a nice guy, as hard as this is to say, my mom has a way of changing you, her influence. And there were some drugs going on in that house. I remember they started to fight. And like one of the fights, he had a cat. My mom loved Cadillacs. I don't know. It was just the car of choice. She loved it. And he had a Cadillac. And I don't know if he bought it for her. I don't know if he already had it, but he had a Cadillac. And I remember them getting like high, and something happened with the Cadillac, or they chased each other with the cars, which would happen more than once. I don't know. But as things were going, and through all of this, which I never said, when my mom, she would either beat us with her hands or a belt, or sometimes, not sometimes, a lot of times, she would make us go out and pick a switch. And that's how she would hit us, with a switch. Now me, because when you're hit with a switch enough, you learn if you get the thicker switches that are sort of brittle, when you hit them, it'll snap, and then it doesn't hurt as bad. But if you get the green switches, the thin green switches, those hurt like an... And so sometimes she would have us get a switch for our siblings. So whenever, just out of compassion, I would get like a thicker wood one, so that when it brittle, so that when it would hit, she would hit them, it would break. Well, my little sister, she had a lot of pain and aggression, and I imagine it was from some of the traumatic events. She would be very cruel to me. She very, very often, and this is, remember I said earlier that I don't like my hair touched? She would grab my hair and literally rip my hair right out of my head. And a lot of times she would get back here. And so I could not stand for people to touch my head. And like, I would scream, "Don't pull my hair." And she would just pull my hair and rip it out. But when I was the one getting in trouble, she would actually go out and get the greenest, thinnest switch she could get, because it was like a whip. It was like smacking you with a whip, and it hurt. And I say all that to say, because there was a girl down the street whose mom used to beat her with a belt. And my mom, like, was offering for this girl to live with us and stuff, and like was, you know, appalled at the fact that this woman was beating her, you know, and it was a friend of my sister Pauline's. And the thought of an abuser not being able to see her own abuse would run throughout her life. Like, she was unable to see the abuse that she was causing, but she would be outraged if she saw abuse in other people. You know what I mean? Like, that happens a lot, because later it would happen with other things where people couldn't see the abuse that they were putting on other people. They could only see that they were a victim. They made themselves a victim in every situation. And I have to tell you, my personality, I don't like people who have a victim mentality. I don't like people who let me repeat that. With my personality, I don't like a victim mentality. I don't like a gang mentality. I don't like a welfare mentality. I don't like a spirit of entitlement. I don't like a spirit of expectation over other people. Those are issues for me that I just don't like. It reminds me of my family, and I get very, I don't like it when I see it in myself come out. I don't like it when I see it in anybody I love or care about. I just don't like it, because a victim mentality means that you make yourself not responsible for your own behavior. It's always their fault. A gang mentality is an us against them. You know, a welfare mentality is I don't have to work for it. You have to give it to me. You owe me. A spirit of expectation and spirit of entitlement means that you're putting an obligation on another human being without their say so, and like you deserve it. And none of that's true. So there are victims out there. There are people we were victims. We were victimized. But that doesn't give me a right to have a victim mentality, meaning I'm not responsible for my behavior. Because a victim mentality will say, yeah, someone hurt me, but I'm not responsible for my behavior either. It's all their fault. And I'm not saying they're not victims. What I'm saying is a victim mentality is different than being victimized. I've been victimized, but it doesn't make me to have the right to have a victim mentality. I'm still responsible, 100% responsible for my behavior. I'm still 100% responsible for my choices, my attitude, my actions, my desires, my motives. Those are all my responsibility. I can't put that off on, I do this because my mom did this. No, those situations created something inside of me that made me react to it, but I'm still responsible on how I'm going to choose to react to it. All of the stuff I'm sharing with you that happened to me, it happened to me. But it doesn't negate my responsibility on what I'm going to do with it. I don't get to sit here and say I'm a victim, so I'm not responsible for my behavior. Nope, I'm a victim, so that makes me even more responsible for my behavior. Because I know what it's like. I don't have any excuses. I have to do what's right because I know what it's like to see what happens when people don't do what's right. Okay, off my soapbox again. Sorry about if I offend people. It's just I feel very strongly about that because I watched it with my mom. And this is one of the particular situations. One of my sister's friends is being abused by her mom with a belt while my mom beats us with a belt or bottles or throws knives at us, or in this particular instance with my stepdad, he wasn't my stepdad at the time, her boyfriend. Why he stayed, I don't know. I don't know if he stayed for his kids. I don't know. I would have left. But, well, no, that's not true. I say I would have left, but I don't honestly know if I would have left. They get in a fight. And I remember us kids, a lot of times what we would do, one of two things would happen. Either we would try to prevent the fight, but if we knew that the fight wasn't going to be prevented, we would try to escape it, like leave, go down the street, take the kids and leave, which is what we did. We left and we were down the street. Well, then suddenly we see like an ambulance at the house. And my mom had picked up a lamp and hit my stepdad over the head. And when she hit him over the head, she cut off part of his ear from the lamp. And so, yeah, that I remember that distinctly at this house on West Otis. And for some reason, what's funny is he came back. He stayed. And not only did he stay, we end up leaving there. And we were there for my 4th grade. And then we end up moving. And I don't know why he stayed. I have no idea why he stayed. But you stayed for the kids, but he stayed. And then from there, we end up moving to Pontiac, Michigan. And it was a house that he owned. I remember it being really yucky on the outside, like it needed paint, but the inside was beautiful. And I remember people making fun of us, kids making fun of us, because of the outside being yucky. But once they would come inside, they're like, wow, this is really beautiful wood. It was a beautiful house. It just needed a good paint job. But anyway, from West Otis, we moved in with Lee into this house that he owned. And we could even see the Pontiac Dome when you stepped outside. And this is the house where my sister Pauline would throw my 10th birthday for me. She would throw me my 10th birthday because my mom, again, wouldn't do anything. And I think that's when people saw the inside of the house. But it was very sweet of her to do that. And then at this house, there was this Hispanic family, and it was the first time that I had like exposure to different kinds of foods, really. And I remember this this girl who was my friend, she was Hispanic. Her mother, she made like these homemade tortillas, and she would like grill them on top of the gas stove, like the cast iron grate of a, so good. The food was so good. I just remember like, yummy. And so that I remember about there. I also remember that Lee, and this was kind of cool, Lee would take us on jobs because, like I said, he owned his own construction company, and sometimes he would let us like paint the door or whatever, and he tried to give us things to do so that we were participating in this, which was cool. And he would like, I think he would give us like 50 cents or whatever. And it was just letting us be a part of something. And I just always thought like, I appreciated adults who like cared about us and didn't just dismiss us as, and the truth is most of it was like, go outside and play, go outside and play, get out of my hair, go outside and play. But when adults took interest in us in a healthy way, we didn't like it when they took interest in us in an unhealthy way. There was a lot of that, but when they would take interest in us in a healthy way, it was pretty awesome. You know, I felt very grown up sitting there painting that screen door, you know. And the one thing I do remember, because in going back to living in West Otis, is when they would, I think it was Johnny, not Johnny, because that's the boyfriend, but John or whatever his name was. I don't know why I can't remember. Later I'll tell you. I'm like, oh, I talked to somebody and they told me the name was. But he would come, he owned a roofing company, the first guy that she lived with on West Otis. And he would come home with the tar, and I remember that smell. Oh my gosh, I hated that smell. It disgusted me. Hated it. Still do. Hated that smell. But I enjoyed. I enjoyed painting with Lee. I enjoyed, you know, even though I didn't like the fact that we were teased at how bad the outside of the house looked. It was a nice house, and I felt, you know, I felt pretty safe there. Because I think Lee stabilized things, even though my mom was abusive to him. And she could be really bad, you guys. It was awful. She could cuss a blue streak like nobody's business. And I hated cussing growing up. Now I cuss. At 54, I do. But, oh my gosh, especially when she got mad, she would cuss. She would put a sailor to shame. And sometimes I have a sibling, when she gets mad, she'll do that. She'll cuss a blue streak, and it makes me, I start laughing, and she's like, what's so funny? And I'm like, you sound like mom. And it makes me laugh because it's just silly. I'm like, but I cuss though now too. I didn't used to for a long time, but I do now, and I'm not bragging that I do that. I hate it, but I realize now, and looking back, that maybe she was just being her authentic self. I don't know. But anyway, from here, I'm actually going to take a break. I think I'm going to end it right here, because from here, we actually move back to Illinois again to, this is, I'm doing, I had turned 10 and I had already started 5th grade. But for 5th grade, we finish it out go back to Illinois, back to Loves Park. There's a lot of, we do the whole bouncing around thing again. But I think I'm going to stop here. Oh my gosh. Yeah. We've been talking a while, you guys. So, with that, I think I'm going to end. We're in Pontiac, and we're preparing to move back to Loves Park again. I love you guys. I hope you're blessed. I hope you have a great day. I don't think I forgot anything. If I did, I'll come back to it in the next one. So I will see ya. Melinda out.